Welcome back to Deeper in the Word. I'm Pastor Ricky. I hope that you're doing fantastic today. Hey, before this video is over today, if you could like, share, and or comment, that helps us out tremendously. Also, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that notification bell so that you know when we're going live with some new stuff here at High Point. Today, we're going to get back into our Letters to the Church series. I hope that you guys have been enjoying it so far. Let's jump back into it. Well, if you were with us last week, we made a bit of a transition, and I made you a guarantee last week that if you stuck with us over the next few weeks, that you would have a better understanding of Christianity than a vast majority of people who call themselves Christians today. That guarantee is still in place, so stick with us, and especially today, because today we're going to move into talking about atonement. Again, last week we transitioned into what Jesus actually did for us. We've been talking about in the first part of Hebrews who Jesus was and why he was better than all of these other Old Testament figures. Now we're going to talk about what he did and why it was better than the Old Testament atonement, or facsimile of atonement, or the type and shadow of atonement. So first of all, what is atonement? Atonement is the remission of sin. It is the thing that covers our transgression against God. But the Old Testament had a process by which man could enter into God's presence, but it was a very difficult process, and it was very limited as to who could actually enter into God's presence. But what Jesus did and the atonement that he gave us was complete, it was final, and it was universal. And so today we're going to talk about the Old Testament rituals, the Old Testament tabernacle. We're going to go inside the tabernacle now and look at a few things. And we're going to compare it to what Jesus did in his time here on earth to bring finality of atonement for our sins. So the writer here in chapter 9 begins by taking us on a journey into the sanctuary that was in the tabernacle. And as I explained last week, for those who are unaware, in the Old Testament, the tabernacle was this place that God gave the children of Israel when they were wandering around in the desert. He gave them very exact measurements and dimensions and very specific instructions on building this tabernacle. This was the portable structure that they had while in the wilderness, and eventually very similar design aspects would be found in the temple. If you recall, a few months ago, those of you who were with us in service or watched online, I did a sermon and we talked about the temple. And I actually took you on a journey from the outside of the temple, and we worked our way all the way into the Holy of Holies. And I told you throughout there who was able to get into the different sections of the temple. And all of that was to show you how grace has now given all of us access to that Holy of Holies. I believe I made a comment in that sermon that if you read through Hebrews chapter 9, it basically is my sermon. And so we're going to basically go through that again. But in chapter 9, the writer is really doing a couple of things here. One, he is telling us that all of the things about the tabernacle were types and shadows of realities to come. Again, that is a huge point that the writer is trying to make in the book of Hebrews, that everything in the Old Testament, all these very specific designs that God had about the tabernacle and the temple, and all of the things of the law, all of these things pointed to realities that were to come. And when those realities were to come, then we would see what God was trying to show us through all of these things in the law. And he's given us an example here of the tabernacle. The other thing that he's doing is showing how the atonement structure of the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, was inadequate. It wasn't enough, and that what Jesus brought us was, everybody say it with me, better. So let's get into chapter 9 here. We're going to read